Hello, everybody. Long time no see. This has been an incredibly busy year for me, which is such a blessing. And I actually just finished up teaching for the year a couple days ago. And it was an overwhelming season in a really good way, though. I had 46 full time students this last semester for private lessons, and which is the most I've ever done by about 12 students. And it just wore me out. So that's why I've been kind of gone for the last like 2 months, if you noticed or cared to notice. So I just finished up, and the next several weeks while I'm taking time off for work from that, I still play for my Christmas Eve service at church and several other things. But for the most part, I'm just relaxing. I'm finding ways to have fun with music again. There's some things I want to learn about and explore. A couple projects I'm behind on that I can use the next couple weeks to catch up on, and also making YouTube videos again. So today, I just want to talk about some of the biggest things I've learned this year, very informally. So if you're a musician or a teacher, you don't even have to be a music teacher. We can kind of share some of the things we've learned together. And with that being said, if you're a musician, share something that you achieved this year or something you learned about. If you're a teacher, tell me something that you've learned this year that's really helped the way that you educate. I'd love to hear it. Always looking to learn things like this. And I'm just going to share with you some of the things that I learned this year. So, the first and maybe the most important realization that I've had for myself and for the way I talk to my students is just changing some of the language I use. So, as a musician or as any type of learner, we usually see things as easy or difficult, like easy or hard or challenging. And I've changed my language with this to become familiar and unfamiliar. So if a student is really confident with something, I don't say it's easy for them because for someone else, it's not easy at all. But for you, you're just familiar with it. So it's now become easy for you. A funny example is say you're eating dinner at the dinner table, you're able to talk with the people around you, and you're confidently able to eat. You're not worried about stabbing yourself in the cheek with your fork or cutting yourself with your knife because you're familiar with what it takes to eat. But you're also able to choose what you want. You're able to converse with people around you and eat in a way that you're not thinking about it. So you're familiar with that. Just like with music, we want it to be, once we're familiar with something, we want it to be as easy as sitting down to eat. I can add in musical ideas, I can add in my own interpretation, and I'm just familiar with those things. And if something's really challenging, for myself, I don't use the word challenging or hard anymore. I just say I'm unfamiliar with that, and it's something I need to learn. And just that little mindset change has really helped me actually, because things aren't hard. People learn how to do them. It's just unfamiliar to myself. So I think that's just a softer language to use. So if my students ever they're getting frustrated, I'm like, well, we're not familiar with this, and it takes a little bit of time to familiarize ourselves with it. Just something that's really helped me a lot. Another thing I learned this year is just the importance of consistent practice, even if it's 5 minutes a day. I would rather my students practice and myself too. 6 days a week for 5 minutes than one day a week for 6 hours because you're just not able to retain anything. The most important thing is sitting down at your instrument, sitting down at whatever you want to learn, and just getting into it for 5 minutes, even if it's like exercising. Just do 20 push ups a day. It makes a huge difference. And what's so incredible about this is say I spend 5 minutes practicing the piano today. The things I worked on yesterday, I'm going to sleep and those things are going to replay themselves in my mind. And when I sit down to play the next day, it's compound interest. I get to build on what I did yesterday while it's still fresh in my mind. So just the importance of, for myself, I'll go in spurts where I'll be playing for like 3 days in a row and I'm just practicing and getting a lot done. And I almost burn myself out a little bit and then I don't practice for like a week. And then I pretty much have to start over with the things I was learning. So for myself, it's almost being a little bit easier on myself consistently. So I want to make it a little easier to meet that day-to-day standard. So for myself, pretty much from like 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. every day, I'm practicing. And what that looks like is I definitely do a little bit of technique, a little bit of sight reading, a little bit of oral skills and singing. And then for like 30 minutes, I just work on two repertoire pieces. And so in that hour, I've met my goal. It's 8:30. I'm ready to go about the rest of the day. And if I want to do more, I can. I'm free to do so. But I've gotten my hour in and I can feel really good about that. Another thing I learned this year, and this is something I've been gradually learning over time, is that some skills are more important than others in music. So say you're someone who doesn't have a lot of time, there's certain things you can be practicing that will, it's almost like the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the stuff you do, it takes up 80% of what the result is. So if you don't have a lot of time to practice, the biggest thing I would say is spend a lot of time in technique and theory in a way that reflects the technique. A lot of music follows patterns, so like an entire measure will be built around one chord. So if you know a C major chord is C E G, and you kind of see the patterns, look, it's a C E D, C E G. There's a D. That's just a passing tone. And so you start to see measures of music as ideas. And if you've practiced things like scales and arpeggios, your fingers will naturally mold to the phrasing of the music. A really good example of this is if you see a piece that has lots of arpeggios in it, and you've practiced both triad arpeggios, which would be like the three notes, like for E, E, G sharp, B, or the seventh chords, which for like an E major seven would be the E, G sharp, B, D sharp, and you've worked on those, when you see it in the music, you can quickly insert what you've already practiced. And so when we practice in this way, we're compounding what we know. So if you don't have a lot of time to practice, spend a lot of time doing technique, but also thinking about how that applies to your theory, being able to quickly play a 2-5-1 in any key, being able to play any major or minor arpeggio, understanding what every type of seventh chord is. So the major seventh, the dominant, the minor, half diminished, and the fully diminished will pay huge dividends over time. And that's something that just takes a little bit of work every day. Over time, you'll see it makes huge differences in your ability to learn pieces quickly. And the fourth thing is kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier with familiar and unfamiliar, but a little bit more. The idea of mastery. I know for myself, I'll look at other musicians and see what they're doing and be like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. I can never do that. They're a master. But I've learned that mastery isn't becoming the best at everything. You can be the master of one thing. And I've been encouraging my students recently to think of themselves as masters. So when we're learning a piece of music, no matter how simple it is, when we can play that without thinking about it at all, it's totally committed to muscle memory, and we can start to add in our own musicianship to it. So say you play it quietly, or you play it with long expressive phrases, or you play it loudly, and you start to create your own personal nuances of the piece. That's when we've kind of imposed mastery over that piece. So someone can become a master of playing a C major scale. They could be the best C major scale player in the world. Someone could be a master at just dropping one finger onto the key and really thinking about, what does it mean for me not to be tense? What does it mean for gravity to drop my finger onto this key as I spectate that happening, that loose feeling of being able to just freely play. And we can become masters of little things. And the way I'm approaching music, and this will be for more of like a New Year's thing, I want to really take my time and make sure I've mastered a concept before I jump ahead to something new. I read a book recently, Effortless Mastery. I was blanking for a second. Effortless Mastery. And it talked about this, how we will spend a lot of time, and once we get just to the point where we finished it, we move on to something new before we've really had a time to commit that to our mind, which is why a lot of people learn, like myself. I might learn a dozen pieces in a year, and then at the end of the year, I only remember like two of them. So really spending the time and to achieve full mastery over those things. And the last thing I've really learned this year about myself and how I relate to students is music has to be fun. The whole point of music is it's a cultural phenomenon. Through over the last thousands of years, humans, we express ourselves musically, whether that's rhythm and we're stomping our feet and clapping our hands, or we're singing to each other, or we're telling stories. This is something that is supposed to be fun. It's part of the human experience. And it's been really hard for me as someone who's chosen to make this my career and that I depend on for my income to not think of it as a job. But we have to remember music is fun. And for my students, I don't want to just be harping on technique. You have to do it this way. This has to be correct. Here's how music's fun. Here's how we can make it fun. And so some things I do sometimes is I just will come up with like singing exercises if a student's comfortable with that, and I'll play something, they'll sing it back to me. Or I'll play pieces of music and let them sing along with me, or we'll clap our hands to rhythms and stuff. I just try and do things where it doesn't feel like just a boring 30 minutes. I want to make it engaging and fun. What that means for myself for anybody who's an adult learner, don't learn something if you don't want to. You can play whatever music you want. If you're trying to learn a jazz piece and you are just dreading it, it's going miserable, throw it in the trash can. Pick a whole nother piece of music, move on. It's okay. So all that to say, whatever you're doing in music, make sure you're having so much fun. One of the best feelings in the world is when you sit down at the piano and it feels like you've been playing for 10 minutes and you look at the clock and an hour and a half's gone by and you just got completely lost in the music and the fun that you were having. Something cool for this is just come up with a simple chord progression and play it. So it can just be like 2 or 3 chords. Play it over and over again. And as you start to feel really comfortable with it, maybe play the chords in the left hand and your right hand takes a simple melody. Make it a one note melody. Bum, ba, 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 ba. And just try and come up with something creative using one note. And then add in a second note. Da, 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 da. And then da, 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 da. Whatever you want it to be. And I find that when you're doing stuff like this, not only are you composing and creating your own music, the time just flies by and you don't even realize that you're having a blast. So a lot of the things that I learned musically this year, and I'm 27, I'm very young, and I've only been teaching for maybe 4 or 5 years. So I'm still learning a lot, but a lot of this year has been about how I think about music, how I want my students to think about music, and kind of setting myself up for a lifetime of music. I want to make sure I'm not getting burnt out on these things. I want to make sure that right now I'm 27. Where do I want to be at 30 and 3 years from now? Where do I want to be at 35? Where do I want to be as a 55-year-old musician? And kind of creating a runway for myself in the future. So I'm really trying to shape in my mind, how do I approach these things? How do I think about these things? And how will I be excited about learning? Thanks so much for watching this video. Like I said, if you're a musician, I'd love to get to know you. If you're a teacher, I'd also love to get to know you. So let me know what you liked about this, what you want to do in the future, and how you're going to, I guess, approach this new year. But thanks again. I'll see you guys next time.